Good evening and welcome to this regular meeting of the Council of the Municipality of North Perth. Are we getting audio? Can you hear me back there? Okay, the audio is uncertain. Our meeting date is Monday. Okay. All right. We will try again. Good evening and welcome to this regular meeting of the Council of the Municipality of North Perth. Our meeting date is Monday, November 7th, 2022. I'm Mayor Todd Kasenberg and I'll call this meeting to order. I ask the clerk to note our starting time for the minutes as 7 p.m. Councillors are in the council chamber in Listowel, joined by the clerk and other staff and a consultant who are supporting this meeting. We are still supported by various digital technologies, and some staff, delegates, and experts will join us by web conferencing. Some members of the public are not here tonight. Maybe that should be more accurate about that. We're not seeing people from the public in the chamber, but we assume that some have joined us remotely. We've heard that happens. We begin tonight's meeting with the playing of O Canada. Those in the chamber as able are invited to stand. Well, now we have a member of the public who has joined us, so I guess my statement earlier was true. Welcome, Mark. Let's begin with our land acknowledgement this evening. We acknowledge that we are on the traditional land of the Anishinaabe peoples. We wish to recognize the long history of Indigenous peoples in Canada and show our respect to them today. We recognize their stewardship of the land. May we all live with respect on this land and live in peace and friendship. Tonight's meeting is being streamed live on the Municipality of North Perth YouTube channel and will be available there after the meeting as an archived video. To those present in the gallery today, by attending a public meeting of the Council, you are consenting to your image, voice, and comments being recorded. Anyone who is invited to speak will be recorded, and their voice, image, and comments will form part of the live stream. The chair and/or the clerk have the discretion and authority at any time to direct the termination or interruption of live streaming. Such direction will only be given in exceptional circumstances when deemed relevant. Circumstances may include instances where the content of debate is considered misleading, defamatory, or potentially inappropriate to be published. Attendees are advised that they may be subject to legal action if their actions result in inappropriate and/or unacceptable behavior and/or comments. Thank you. Welcome tonight to those who are joining us via the YouTube channel. Welcome to councillors, staff, and consultant, and member of the public who are with us today. At this time, I invite your decorum over the course of the coming meeting. I have regrets tonight from Councillor David Johnston, who is serving our community in a different capacity this evening as a coach with the team that is at the Royal Winter Fair in Toronto. Let us move to item 2.1 of our agenda pertaining to pecuniary interest. For the benefit of those unfamiliar with our council practices, provincial legislation requires councillors with a potential pecuniary or financial interest in any item at the council table to declare this interest and to remove her or himself from discussions and voting on the item. In accordance with recommended protocol at this time, I invite all councillors with perceived pecuniary interest, including those who have already declared in writing, to verbally advise the chair in public session and to submit documentation to this effect in writing to the clerk. Councillors are further reminded that should a potential conflict arise during the meeting, they may so declare and act at any point in the meeting. And I believe we start tonight with one. I think Councillor Behrens has one, so let me call on Councillor Behrens. Welcome.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Kasenberg, I will declare a conflict of pecuniary interest on 5.3.1, the construction of the Reid Municipal Drain, as well as 13.1, the confirmatory bylaw, as I have family members assessed on that drain. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Behrens. Any other councillors wishing to make a declaration at this point? I am not seeing any, so that allows us to move forward. All participants are invited to speak when called upon by yours truly serving as chair. Those participating remotely may wish to speak, and who wish to speak, find my words, may draw the attention of the clerk through our conferencing technologies chat function. Remote participants are asked to generally maintain a mute state in the web conference until I recognize your right to the floor. If, when I do so, recognize I don't hear you because you are muted or having some technical difficulty, I will advise. As always, we invite patience with these processes. There are lots of moving parts in technology here, and we're not always getting it just perfect. Let's turn to item 2.2 on our agenda then. This is a motion for the adoption of the agenda of tonight's meeting that is simple and as follows, that the agenda for tonight's meeting be approved. Can I call for a mover on this one? Councillor Richardson, thank you. And a seconder will be Councillor Anstead. Any discussion or debate on this one? Seeing none, let's have that vote. And we're missing, there we go, there's our 9 votes. So with that, that is carried. Thank you. That brings us to item 3 on our agenda, the so-called consent agenda. These items are placed on our agenda because they are believed to be non-contentious, yet they warrant council's recognition and or action. Grouping them expedites our business. However, any councillor wishing to extract an item from the consent agenda for discussion, debate, or individual action may do so. This one is a doozy. There were 17 items on our consent agenda tonight, including the minutes of our last regular council meeting. Councillors, do any of you have a desire to extract any of these items for further discussion or action? Councillor Rothwell, welcome.
Thanks, Mayor Todd, and good evening, Council. I'd just like to have some additional comment on the Blue Water Recycling Association's comments. I'm just looking for the number here.
By 3.9.
Yes, that's the one, please.
3.9, thank you. Anyone else wishing to raise or extract an item for discussion or consideration? All right, I'm not seeing any. Let's bring Councillor Rothwell in at this point. I think we probably can.
And just for Council's information, the public, as Blue Water Recycling Association rep for this area, at our last meeting we did set the budget for 2023, and you'll see in the reports there from Francis, our director, that we are looking at a deficit in terms of our 2023 operating deficit, and this is strictly due to the decline in the prices for recyclables. We went from record highs to almost record lows here within this past year in particular, and unfortunately, for our revenue side, that's not a good thing. However, we do have invested heavily in terms of our technologies and so on, so we are certainly hoping to make things flow well into this year of transition to producer responsibility. So just there is an increase in share price, and of course, North Perth being one of the owners here of the association, that's good news for us in terms of an increase on the share price for the municipality. So if there's any questions, I'd be glad to address them. Thank you.
Thanks for drawing our attention to that, Councillor Rothwell. Did any councillors wish to ask questions of Councillor Rothwell in his capacity as our representative to Blue Water Recycling at this point? Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you for that. I have a resolution then for our consideration as follows: that consent items 3.1 to 3.17 be received for information, and the minutes of the October 17th, 2022 regular council meeting be adopted. Can I call for a mover? Councillor Behrens, thank you, and Councillor Rothwell will be our seconder. Any discussion or debate? Seeing none, let's have that vote. And that is carried. Thank you very much. At this time, it's proposed that we move to agenda item number 4. Tonight we have 2 public meetings scheduled pertaining to a drain and a land planning matter. To enable a public meeting, we must temporarily adjourn from council. I have a resolution that enables us to do so as follows. The Council of the Municipality of North Perth adjourns at 7:12 p.m. for the purpose of public meetings under the Drainage Act and the Planning Act concerning the following: a public meeting to consider the Partridge Municipal Drain, and a public meeting to consider housekeeping amendment number 15-2022 to the North Perth zoning bylaw. Can I call for a mover on this one? Councillor Seiler, welcome, thank you. And Councillor Andreessen, welcome, and thank you for being our seconder. Any discussion or debate? Seeing none, let's have that vote. And that is carried. Thank you. We are temporarily in recess. Now, we're going to have these 2 public meetings. The first pertains to the Partridge Municipal Drain. And this is a public meeting that presents a drainage report. I welcome any of the assessed landowners to the conference. I'm not sure if we've had indication ahead of time. All right, so we may not have any with us, but at this time we do have Mr. Brandon Widener from Spreet Associates, who is with us as an engineer to present the drainage report. Welcome, Mr. Widener.
Good evening, everybody. Tonight we have the Partridge Drain number 2. So this is a request by Toner family. They operate under Toll Acres. If you remember back in time, we did a drain with them a couple of years ago. It was called the Logan Maitland. This one is just down that same road. It's just east of Moncton. It's an existing open ditch. It bisects one of their farms. It's on the north side of the road. So we have a small watershed here. There is 3 landowners involved. There is Van Newland, there's the Toners, and there's Mr. Davidson. So the request here was to enclose the open ditch through the Toner property. It's an existing municipal drain. The top end in the Newland property was previously abandoned. So we have a proposal here tonight to enclose the entire portion of open ditch in Toner's property. So we're looking at approximately 925 meters. This is a 150-acre farm, I believe. And it ranges from 18-inch to 27-inch tile. Total cost of the project is approximately $173,000. Now, because this is a drain enclosure, there is no grant. It is also entirely assessed to the Toners. So the only thing you're seeing from the other owners here, you're seeing a new revised maintenance schedule. That's in Schedule D on page 9. Other than that, all the work is on the Toner property. There is some additional ditch deepening on the Davidson property, but that's an existing drain. The work will be done from Toner's side. One person accessed. They know it's coming. They would like construction in the near future. I guess if anyone has any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Mr. Widener. Let's turn to council and questions from assessed landowners. So the clerk is saying that we're not aware of any assessed landowners who've joined us in this meeting remotely. There are none in the chamber as well. So council, do you have any questions about this matter? I'm not seeing any questions at this point. There has been at this point no indication of withdrawal or significant concerns that have been raised. So as a consequence, with regards to this meeting, this public meeting for the consideration of Partridge Municipal Drain, we may now adjourn. All right, let's adjourn that one. Let's turn our attention next then to a public meeting which I'll call to order for the purposes of an application under the Planning Act. I'd like to welcome those who are attending this public meeting pursuant to the Planning Act for a proposed amendment to the North Perth zoning bylaw. This is a statutory public meeting to deal with housekeeping amendment number 15-2022 to the North Perth zoning bylaw 6-ZB-1999. Initiated by the municipality of North Perth, affecting all lands within the municipality. Correspondence, reports, and comments received regarding this application will be considered by council. Those in attendance remotely wishing to make comments concerning this application will be given the opportunity to do so. Anyone wishing to appeal the council's decision in this matter must make verbal submissions during this public meeting or have made a written submission to council. Those wishing to receive notice of the decision regarding this application must notify the clerk via email or telephone, giving their mailing address and telephone number. At this time, I will call for a summary of this application. This will be offered by Jerica Gilbert, planner for the County of Perth. Welcome, Planner Gilbert.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Council. I'm excited to present this application to you tonight. For those of you at home, housekeeping amendments can be used to, Yes, housekeeping amendments are used to correct minor errors in the zoning bylaw or to update our zoning bylaw to reflect existing good planning practice. And I believe that's what we're doing here tonight. So 15-2022 is to address some issues that we found with our stacked townhouses definition. So a stacked townhouse, we have an example of one on the screen. This is a rendering for a development that's proposed in London, Ontario. And we're hoping to see more developments like this in the North Perth area. Townhouses are a form of medium density. They're great at adding gentle density to our neighborhoods and can fit quite well into the neighborhood form. The proposed changes have come about after a jurisdictional scan. So I looked at 35 municipalities, those bordering Perth County, as well as St. Mary's, Stratford, and the City of Toronto, basically to see what other municipalities were using for their definition. And what we basically found is that our limitations to 2 units high for the stacked townhouses definition was not reflective of what other areas were doing and likely quite restrictive. In addition to that, something else that was noticed, that having a private entrance to grade level seemed a little unnecessary. I spoke with building to confirm that removing this section of the definition wouldn't have any adverse consequences, and it doesn't appear that there's anything that can't be addressed through the building code. And as the report details, we also looked at possibly considering some of the R5 zoning provisions. So right now we're only proposing to touch the stacked townhouses definition, but in the future, council may consider addressing some of those height maximums as well as side yards setbacks. So I'm happy to provide any further context, or if anyone has any questions. The planning department is recommending approval of this application. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Planner Gilbert. At this time, I'm going to turn to both you and Clerk Klein to ascertain whether notice of this public meeting has been duly given in accordance with regulations. Clerk Klein, why don't we go to you? I think your microphone 11.
Sorry, let me start over. Through you, Mr. Mayor, is this proposed zoning bylaw amendment affects all properties within the municipality? The notice was posted on our website on October 13th, 2022, advising of the public meeting, and it was also posted in the listable banner and Independent Plus newspapers on October 13th.
I think largely the responsibility was your department's responsibility, so we don't need to check in with Planner Gilbert about that one, right? Let's turn then to a question about correspondence, comments, and reports that were received about this application that council should be aware of. Let's start with Planner Gilbert. Any correspondence, reports, or comments received that we should be aware of?
So as was kind of alluded to in the report, this this housekeeping amendment was kind of discussed with us by a local developer, and I did, through the course of this amendment, have further discussions with them just to kind of get an understanding of what they were hoping to see, since they would be the ones that would be considering most recently to put stack towns in our area. They're in agreement with the proposed changes, I believe, to the definition. They were hoping that we would consider raising the maximum height limits, which I didn't end up proposing at this time because I felt like it was a bit premature. Other than that, I have received no other correspondence, and I have not heard any comments from any member of the public.
Okay, so now I'll direct to the clerk. Clerk Klein, have you had any comments, reports, correspondence pertaining to this matter?
Thing.
Okay, that was a no. I think I didn't get the microphone on fast enough. This time it was me. That was a no from Clerk Klein. All right. So at this point in the meeting, we invite those who are in attendance to make comments should they wish. Just checking in with Clerk Klein. Normally we call for those in favor of the application. Do we have any who've expressed an intent to contribute to the meeting in that way?
Through Mr. Mayor, no.
Okay. Those opposed, have we had anyone register for the purposes of presenting in opposition? Yeah. All right. So that turns us to council at this point. Opportunity for comments or questions. Council, colleagues? Councillor Andreessen.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Kiesenberg. Jerica, in your report, you talked about this height issue in terms of increasing the height in order to make, in order to make it easier for developers with the stacked townhouse idea. And I'm just wondering, would that be another housekeeping item that might come down later? And I'm also just wondering whether it's not something that should be dealt with sooner than later, if that's going to help developers in this type of style of development. Thank you.
Jerica, did you wish to respond?
Yes, thank you. And yes, if something that if council wishes the planning department to kind of turn attention to. Also, as everyone is aware, we are in the middle of the official plan review. And once, it feels like a moving goalpost, but once the official plan comes in, there will be renewed efforts to kind of turn towards our zoning bylaws in order to make sure that they are conforming with the official plan and the secondary plans for our area. And if I suppose what I'm kind of implying by that is if we don't turn our attention to it right now, it is definitely something that is on the planning department's mind as we wish to focus on intensification and introducing gentle density into our neighborhoods. It can be achieved through the zoning bylaw. Another way that other areas have done it is through design guidelines, kind of making different measures for different types of townhouses and low-rise apartments.
Okay, these height restrictions that appear to continue, do they, ultimately, is their effect to limit the size or the height of these buildings to 3 stories? Is that what is invoked here?
Yes, that's what the maximum height provisions in the zoning bylaw do. They limit the building's height to a certain extent. It's not to say that developers can't apply for, say, a minor variance or a zoning bylaw amendment on a site-specific basis. It's just in order to tinker with it right now, I don't feel like we had enough support from the building department that was the way we wanted to go at this point in time.
Okay, thank you. Colleagues, anyone else wishing to ask questions at this point? Councillor Rothwell?
Thanks very much. Thanks very much, Mayor Todd, and thanks, Jerica, for the report. I'm in agreement with the proposed changes. It is difficult to come forward with changes in terms of bylaw regulations when we haven't got a specific plan before us. And I appreciate the scan of the surrounding jurisdictions and so on, but as far as I understand, there's been no stacked townhouses built within North Perth, so we have to look to those other jurisdictions, and this proposal by a local developer, while exciting, until we actually see plans and know specifically exactly what it is that they have planned, we don't know for sure as to whether the proposal that we have before us is going to be to their satisfaction, because things can change. But certainly in agreement with Planner Gilbert's comments in terms of this is what's also called the missing middle that's been in the news in terms of having some slightly higher densities within our neighborhoods. Low-rise apartments and townhouses are certainly something which is necessary, and smaller unit sizes, which will hopefully also address the issue of affordability. So on those reasons, I am in favor, but we may see other changes as time comes to pass. But I agree with Planner Gilbert that other than the modification in terms of the definition, I don't think anything is necessary at this time. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Rothwell. Anyone else wishing to ask a question or make a comment on this one in the public meeting? All right. First, thanks to staff for their support with this application. And I will advise in this usual way, notice of the decision of council will be given in accordance with the provisions of the Planning Act. Council's decision is subject to appeal to the Ontario Land Tribunal in accordance with the provisions of the Planning Act. At this point, then, I can adjourn this particular public meeting. And council, we have one more matter here, which is to adjourn our public meeting session and move back into regular open council. So I have a resolution to that end as follows: that public meetings under the Drainage Act and the Planning Act are now adjourned at 7:29 p.m. and that council reconvene into regular open council. Can I call for a mover on this one? Councillor Duncan, thank you. And a seconder will be Councillor Andreessen. Any discussion or debate on that? Seeing none, let's have that vote. And we are missing Councillor Seiler, I think. And with that, that is carried. Thank you. Council, then we are resumed in regular open session. Now we have the matters that we've just covered to address in open session. Let's turn to item 4.1. First, as follows, that the Council of the Municipality of North Perth accepts the Partridge Municipal Drain Report dated October 13th, 2022, prepared by Spreet Associates. Can I call for mover this one? Councillor Richardson, thank you, and Councillor Behrens, thank you, as our seconder. Any discussion or debate on this one? Seeing none, let's have that vote. And that is carried unanimously. Next up is the quarter revision. The resolution as follows, that the Council of the Municipality of North Perth will hold the quarter revision for the Partridge Municipal Drain on December 12th, 2022 at 6:30 p.m. Can I call for a mover on this one? Councillor Anstead, thank you, and Councillor Rothwell is our seconder. Any discussion or debate on that timing? Seeing none, let's have that vote. And that is carried. Thank you. And one more resolution on this matter, the bylaw as follows, that bylaw number 135-2022, being a bylaw to provide drainage works, the Partridge Municipal Drain, be introduced and considered read a first and second time and be provisionally adopted. And that the said bylaw be signed by the mayor and the clerk and sealed with the seal of the corporation. Councillor Duncan will serve as our mover, who will be our seconder. Councillor Behrens, thank you. Any discussion or debate? Seeing none, let's have that vote. And that is carried as well. Next, then, let's turn to the zoning bylaw matter. And I think we have two resolutions here. The first as follows, that the Council of the Municipality of North Perth receives the report dated November 7th, 2022, prepared by the planner, entitled Housekeeping Amendment Number 15-2022 to North Perth Zoning Bylaw 6-ZB-1999, initiated by the Municipality of North Perth and affecting all lands within the municipality. And the Council approves Housekeeping Amendment Number 15-2022 to North Perth Zoning Bylaw 6-ZB-1999. Can I call for a mover? Thank you, Deputy Mayor Kellum, and Councillor Andreessen will be our seconder here. Any discussion or debate on this one further? Seeing none, let's have that vote. And that is carried. And one more on this matter, the bylaw as follows, that bylaw 136-2022, being a bylaw to amend bylaw number 6-ZB-1999 as amended, be introduced, read, and considered read a first, second, and third time and be finally passed, and that the said bylaw be signed by the mayor and the clerk and sealed with the seal of the corporation. Can I call for a mover? Councillor Andreessen is going to move this, and Councillor Richardson will be our seconder here. Any discussion or debate on this one? Seeing none, let's have that vote. And that is carried. Thank you very much. Now I catch up on my own paperwork here. That brings us to agenda item number 5, reports from departments and key staff. Tonight we have 5 items coming from the CAO's department. For item 5.1.1, the HR committee has recommended that council attend to the matter of council compensation before the expiry of this term of council. It has been 6 years since adjustments have been made to council compensation, and circumstances have certainly changed. To support this matter, our HR consultant responsible for the review and recommendation process is with us tonight for the purpose of providing an overview. I'll invite Ms. Carrie Sharpin from Warden Up to Grove to serve as our expert on this subject matter. Ms. Sharpin, welcome.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Let's see if we've got a good microphone.
Lovely to see everyone in person. How's that? Okay. Okay, I can proceed. It's okay. Thank you. So I have some slides, not very many. There are 3 total reports that have been prepared for council around council remuneration. And I'll just, if I may, just start off with the next slide. Just before I get into those reports, the Municipal Act, Section 224, I do believe, says that municipal councils are obligated under the Act to ensure accountability and transparency of the operations and to ensure that policies, practices and procedures are in place to implement decisions. So with that in mind, I have prepared the memo that comes along with the reports that were prepared to just help council see how this decision fits in with their obligations under the Municipal Act. And that does include, I believe, setting compensation practices. Thank you. So not only for staff, which is very important, but also for council, there is an obligation on council to set a policy, a bylaw for council remuneration that ensures transparency, and that's a really important factor when you have this unusual responsibility to set your own compensation. And so there is a current staff compensation philosophy and policy that ensures that the median of the market is achieved, and arguably that could also apply to council's remuneration bylaw. Yes. Oops. Yeah, would it be better if it's closer to me? Is that a little better? I'm so sorry. I'm sorry. I could hear myself really well, so please let me know if you'd like me to repeat anything. Okay, I see the difference. So arguably, this council needs to establish a review its current bylaw. One exists, as mentioned by Mayor Todd. The last review was undertaken back in 2016, so it's certainly time for a look at how compensation is managed for council. If I could go to the next slide. Thank you. So just to recap, and I know the reports are long. There's a lot of information provided. You'll see three reports, 3 dates here: June 2020, June 2021, and January 2022. And here I am in November 2022. The Warden Updegrove report was dated June 2020 with 2019 information. So we had collected market data back in 2019 and presented recommendations. At that time, it was evident that council remuneration for North Perth was behind the comparator group, and it was a very traditional approach. Warden Updegrove used the same comparators as were used for the staff compensation review, achieved the median calculations, and made some recommendations to increase council. Overall, I want to just point out, as you look across the cost increase row on the slide, it's not, none of these numbers are very significant. So I just want to make sure I point that out, that certainly the recommendations aren't by any means outrageous. In June 2020, as a result of that report, there was some concern and interest in hearing from the community, and a citizens task force was struck, and 3 valuable members of our community volunteered, and they conducted a review not only of the Warden Updegrove report, but also brought forward their expertise and experience in business and municipality operations, and brought forward some additional recommendations, mainly to revise the comparator group slightly. But the other resounding recommendation from that group was that the council size should be reduced also to match that of the median of the revised comparator group. So you see in the middle column for June 2021 a reduction in costs but that would be as a result of a reduction in council size, and it was beyond the task force's mandate to conduct a review of council size. There was a recommendation, and it was left at that. At the request of the HR committee, the task force came together again and looked a little bit more closely at compensation, particularly based on workload concerns. If everyone had read the report from the task force, you'll recall that the task force had asked all of you some questions and you had participated in a survey, and there were concerns over workload. So as a result, it took another look at some other alternatives for compensation strategies, particularly around the mayor and deputy role. And they came up with an interesting strategy, another option for council to consider, which is looking at Statistics Canada data to pull salary information for this community and to conduct a calculation, just really a prorated calculation for compensation for the mayor and deputy. And so you'll see on the far right-hand column, January 2022, are those recommendations in an addendum to the task force's original report. And it's still maintained that council size should be reviewed, and that the median, it remains to be 7. So if I could. So my memo contains several considerations. I do think I've missed a handful. Certainly my advice as the consultant to members of council on compensation, setting your own compensation, not only be transparent, but be strategic. Do consider the future requirements of this municipality, and make sure that the decision that you should make around compensation remuneration should be reflective of that future. As mentioned, I do believe it's past due for review. It is important. It's an important responsibility to ensure that the compensation remains fair for members of council and continues to attract members to run for office. As the consultant, the compensation currently lags, as mentioned in the 2020 report performed by Warden Updegrove and by the Citizens Task Force. Your remuneration lags the market, and there is a median pay philosophy for staff, so therefore it is, as I mentioned earlier, arguable that it should also apply to council members. It may disadvantage council members and may put you at a lower rate of pay for your efforts than your counterparts in other municipalities. And finally, think about timing. As the consultant, we often advise implementing raises for council remuneration with the next term of council, and so tonight I hope that's timely. We are aware that there is a ward review to be undertaken early in the new year, which really should inform what the size of council should be in a way that makes sense for the municipality, and that there are significant legal aspects to reducing council size. So it's not an overnight thing, but certainly the task force had suggested that if budget was there and the intent to review council size, that certainly they're proceeding with something at some point sooner than a reduction should happen was absolutely okay. Also keep in mind that staying competitive and paying at the median for council members at the cost for 10 is obviously higher than it would be for 7. And I'll just remind you all that 7 is the median of the comparator data. And also finally keep in mind that workload now and in the future. For North Perth, the observation is there's a lot going on, and our council members have a wide range of responsibilities and decisions to be made. and we don't assume, I assume that that's not going to change, that will continue into the future. And with that, that's all I have. Any questions for me?
Thank you, Ms. Sharpen, and thank you for bearing with me as I interrupted you around the microphone. I think some of us are struggling with this. Questions or first comments on this matter from council? Okay, we're not. Okay, Councillor Rothwell.
Thanks very much, Mayor Todd, and thanks, Kerry, for the report and the task force as well that was struck. The question of workload certainly is one that you had asked council's opinion about and so on. And one of the striking things was twofold. One, our number of committees that we have in North Perth, which we do have one recommendation tonight from HR committee. So that would be, if council agrees, we're down to 29. Not a huge reduction when you look at some of the other municipalities at, I think, whatever the number was, 16 or something. As well as in connection with that is our number of meetings that we have as a council is at the top end of our comparators. So somehow your comments in terms of our growing municipality and so on, that perhaps necessitates more meetings unless we can somehow reduce our number of meetings and have longer ones. I don't think that's necessarily always a benefit, but we do have a conundrum here in terms of coming up with something that's fair and equitable for our council members. If we expect all councillors to read through on average somewhat large council agenda packages, that does take time and so on. It's not a complaint. I don't think any of us around the table here are doing this to pat our pockets or anything like that. It's compensation for work that's done. It's just a matter of I am concerned about the other question here in terms of reducing council size. At the same time, not knowing what the report that we're going to be dealing with in terms of a reward review. To be fair to our citizens, I think we want to make sure that we have representation which is available to our residents, and but at the same time not having a huge council to deal with. So it's our challenge, I guess, that you've put before council here tonight to somehow come up with something that's going to be fair and equitable. And the proposal is on the basis of our current 10, and if council decides to stay at 10, that means our council costs will be more, other than what the recommendation is at the 7. So I guess those are my comments. It's not an easy path forward in my view that we're challenged to do here. So there's been a lot of thought, I'm sure, around the council table, and I look forward to the conversation. But just the comments that I have, if I read it correctly, is we've put ourselves out as the municipality of North Perth, having large number of meetings, above average number of council members, and we're on the low end of the scale already in terms of compensation. So this isn't exactly someone that's going to, sign up here to come up and want to put their name forward again, in 4 years' time, unless we get this right. So that's our challenge, and I think we're up to it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rothwell. Did you have any comments that you wish to make? Councillor Rothwell was offering comments for the most part, but perhaps there are some key points that you want to elaborate on.
Yeah, I wondered actually if, that if there were concerns coming from Councillor Rothwell about the impact of workload as a result of reducing council size. I thought maybe that's where you were going. But in terms of, and I can't answer that question necessarily, but in terms of, you've read the reports, so that's great, and you have seen that there are a huge amount of meetings, and that there's North Perth is on the high end for several factors, and I do think that is as a result of the range of activities happening here versus some of those other comparators. There's maybe not as many different committees, different types of decisions to be made. at those, maybe those decisions are going to say county, right?
Thank you. Any other questions or first comments on this matter? Let's go Councillor Andreessen first, it looks like, and then Councillor Behrens.
I think it's quite interesting because I think it's really important that we, as professionals and colleagues, value the work that we do. I think we make very important decisions on behalf of our community, and we work hard to, make those decisions in the best interests of, all of our residents in this community. And I think it's really important that we start to value what we do, because I think this is very, very important work. And in order to be valued, right, I think it means that there's compensation involved in making sure that our compensation is, like you were saying, Carrie, at least at that median for sure. The other thing I want to mention is just around the mayor's compensation. As I look at the chart, I see the amount of time that not just our mayor puts in, but all mayors in different municipalities, and the level of responsibility that goes with that is completely, is really incredible. And when I think of people who, run corporations and other types of businesses and their compensation, and I look at how we compensate our mayor, I almost feel it's a bit embarrassing, because a lot goes onto the shoulders of our leader, and yet are we compensating them enough? I know a good example is that, Carrie was mentioning in the report, was how many councillors typically are retired because you couldn't possibly raise a family necessarily and only depend on this income. And that's unfortunate, because we could be missing out on many good possible leaders in the future when they can't necessarily sign up for this type of work because of not being compensated enough. So I think it's important that we look closely at how we compensate our leaders, because a lot rests on their leadership, and we want to pay them accordingly. Thanks.
Thanks. I'm going to hold for the comments after Councillor Behrens' opportunity. So Councillor Behrens?
Thank you, through you, Mayor Kaysenberg. I'm not going to make comment on the January 2022, because I don't agree with the philosophy of how those ranges for the mayor and deputy were come to. And the fact is, you're not applying for a job. There is no requirement for education or anything else. You're simply getting signatures and putting your name forth. You're not getting hired for a job. So to compare it to other salaries around, I simply don't agree with that philosophy. Compare it to other mayors, sure. But I think you're getting into a dangerous zone when you think that you're going to get better candidates by believing that you pay more. The two simply are not conducive to each other. That's my opinion. I personally would agree with the June 2020 report right now, seeing as this is where we are. We simply had an election. We still have a ward system. We still have 10 people on council. The other two dealt with reducing the ward size. I believe that is for the next term, and there'll be a lot of work in the next term, no question about it, to review ward boundaries if they decide to have wards. And because it all works together with the county system and the lower tier system, and certainly I would look to the county to maybe set the stage for reducing their size as well, because it's been long believed that that could be done relatively quickly and painlessly first, and then the lower tiers all follow suit if necessary. So there is so much of the legal requirements to deal with the wards and reducing size. And we don't know if 7 is the right number even. We're just hypothetically saying that it could be. So right now we're dealing with 10. We have an election. I can certainly support the option 1 from the June 2020 report, and to do a slight increase in fairness. But speaking to the workload, and I have to be careful because I've been on for 28 years, and I virtually have done every job. The workload, and in fairness, I was one of those people that did a lot of research on the side. I really did not think that I should be compensated for that in any way, shape, or form, because that was part of my learning. But, there were times when I sat on 4 committees a month. And, we still had 2 council meetings and sometimes a committee of the whole meeting. Everyone who ran in the last election knew that you had 3 meetings a month for council and that you were expected to sit on committee meetings. They knew that going in, and that's what you signed up for, right? And it was publicized what the compensation for that was. So I think it's very difficult for me, but like I said, my initial comments are that I would support the June 2020, the first option. Sorry, everybody.
Anyone else wishing to weigh in with questions or first comments? Councillor Anstead.
Thank you, Mayor Kaysenberg, through you, and thanks, Carrie, very much for the report. Being as somebody that works in HR, I know how much work goes into these reports, salary reviews and compensation reviews. Just the question I did have, though, these figures that you've put up here, when were they finalized? The reason I'm asking that is with the amount of inflation that we've had over the last year here in Canada. I'm just wondering if those numbers are maybe too low. Do they need to be adjusted? Thanks.
Thank you. Yes, the reports all do suggest that those amounts need to be indexed by cost of living from 2020, 2021, 2022. And whatever is approved for, the bylaw currently says whatever is approved for staff is approved for council, I believe. Thank you. Got that right.
Anything further, Councillor Anstead? Okay. Any other questions or first comments? Okay. Councillor Duncan, thank you. Go ahead.
Thanks, Mayor Todd. I give this a lot of thought over the weekend when I started reading it, and although we see cost savings on option 2, I think until we look at the ward boundary review and council composition size, I think it's premature to use number 2 simply because we don't know where we're going with council size at this point. Saying that, I see there is a cost increase for option 1, but at this point, until we have our ward boundary review and council composition review in front of us, I would feel more comfortable going forward with option 1 at this time.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Duncan. Any other first comments? Anyone want to weigh in who hasn't weighed in yet? Councillor Richardson.
Thank you, through you, Mayor Kaysenberg. This is always a very contentious issue at council, just given the nature of what it's referring to. It's always one of those incredibly difficult decisions. On the one hand, I do believe that there needs to be something looked at, and there's elements of 1 that I can certainly agree with, but there's also elements of 2 that we need to look at. The ward boundary review, I think, is going to be very revealing. It's unfortunate that it didn't dovetail with this report, but it's just the way it worked out. This report has actually been out for quite a while, and had addendums added to it. That I do think that going forward, that a reduction in council is of benefit to the council itself, because we're, at a council of 10, we're a rare bird in the entire 444 member municipalities. I do believe it's 1.97% of all municipalities have a council of 10. And that's not going, that's just an average from what AMCTO had put out there back in 2018. And I do think that needs to be looked at, but that's also going to come into light when the ward boundary review comes in. So, and I do believe that that's to do that as well. We do need to do something. I don't know if there's an actual silver bullet answer for anything that we're going to do, but I do like the auspices of number 2, but like Councillor Duncan made mention of, we don't know where we're going yet. That's an uncharted road at this point, and what the county can do. There's a lot of unanswered questions for that. I would like to work towards that to do that, but I think something needs to be done in the interim until that, but seek that happens, and seek that it happens early enough in the next term of council that something can actually be done about it. Because the longer we keep deferring these type of items, no one wants to talk about it. Never, never, never. We'll be here again in another 4 years and be further behind, and reduce council, blah, blah, blah. And it just gets, so that's where I'd like to sort of push it a little bit to make sure that have some serious, difficult discussions regarding this council size going forward. Maybe 7 isn't the right number, but we have to at least have those entire conversations with everything in front of us. So thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Richardson. Can I ask you a question? Actually, I just want to make sure I'm really clear on this. The option 2, which came from the expert committee report, were they trying to figure out what workload would be like for 7 councillors, and that's how they derived those numbers? Or were they saying, we understand the workload and it still makes sense to move this needle this much because you're falling behind the market, and largely their decisions or their position was market driven as opposed to speculative about the workload?
Yeah, certainly. Thank you. Certainly the median data was focused upon for both the remuneration amounts as well as the council size. They're not, I don't think the task force had a number specifically in mind, but that to reduce council size would be appropriate based on the comparator data.
Okay, so that reveal in 2021 was on the basis of notions that we're falling behind the median, and while this council has steered a policy of trying to adhere to the median for staff, this council is failing on adhering to the median for councillors. Is that right?
I would say that's correct.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Councillor Rothwell.
Thanks very much, Mayor Todd. And just, I agree with the comments that have been made in terms of the June 2020 number, because, de facto, the decision has been made by the electorate that we have 10 members around the council table for the next council. So you're going to have a compensation package for 10, period. And maybe the recommendation that this council can make to the next council is that you need to look at the ward review, you need to look at the council composition, and then you need to look at the compensation package for that, for the, not the next, but the council after that. And that has to all be in place well before the election, so that everyone understands and knows that there's the issues. And then thirdly, in terms of the recommendation this council can make to the next council, is you need to look at that workload issue and deal with any other reductions in committees to address the issue of concern in terms of our number of committees and council appointments to committees. So if this council can make those recommendations through to the next council to ensure that that other work is done prior to the election, the next election, I think then our job is done in terms of the recommendations from Carrie and her team, as well as the experts, consultants to, or task force to address the issues. That's my belief. Thank you.
Thanks. Anyone else? Deputy Mayor Kellum?
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mayor Kiesenberg, and all great comments from everyone this evening. And when I was looking at this, I'm looking at it at two different things. I'm looking at our compensation, remuneration, and about the ward system. Yes, we've all been asked from our constituents when we were campaigning this last term about the ward system, and I believe that that's totally different. Whether 7 is a correct number or not, but I feel it's the compensation that we need to deal with. I don't think it's fair for the next council to take this on. I think we're long overdue for this, whether we agree to an increase or whether we don't. But I believe it's up to this council to come up with a fair compensation before the next council is elected. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Deputy Mayor Kellum. So I think most have had their say. Councillor Seiler, did you want to weigh in on this at all, or do you have nothing further to add at this point?
Important that the ratepayers, we make decisions for everybody in this municipality, and ratepayers get to vote for everybody that sits around the table here. You hear that time and time after again. Now, with what the rates you want to pay the people is another thing. So I think we need to take each step forward, and the most important one is that everybody that runs for this council, everybody that lives in this municipality has a chance to vote for whoever sits here. It's fair to us, it's fair to them.
Okay.
Thank you.
It's not necessarily on topic at this moment, but I understand the sentiment that's being expressed. Councillor Behrens?
Thank you, Mayor Kiesenberg. Just a question, Carrie, and thank you so much for the report, but Councillor Anstep brought up a good point about the June 2020 and what the amounts are, but can you go back and check and see, or maybe with the help of our HR person, what that needs to be adjusted by and what needs to be indexed for inflation in that? Because it would be interesting to see what those numbers, I mean, we're looking somewhat at fictitious numbers, because I don't expect you to do it now, maybe for the next meeting, Mayor Kiesenberg, or at some point, but I do think the concept is there, is that, you know, in hearing all the comments around the table, is that we have to show some respect to the council coming in, and but make sure that it's indexed properly and we're dealing with the right numbers. So I don't expect you to do the numbers tonight. You know my intent. Thank you.
And a valuable question I should just ask, just for the point of fact, is I don't suppose you brought index numbers from...
I'm sorry, I wish I'd thought of that, but I didn't. My apologies.
Thank you. All right. You know, we're at that point where everyone's had a chance to comment. I do find myself concerned a little bit about not skewing towards the median, which is our policy with staff. And I do think, therefore, that strategy is attractive to me, and it's justifiable from the approach that we use with everybody in the corporation. If we don't do that, then we are continuing to sort of stay behind the group, and while maybe that's not a significant difference in the scope of the 10 of us sitting here or the next 10 who are sitting here, I think that we need to think about fairness and consistent policy across the board. And so, to me, there's sense that came from the experts that we were, and I do want to comment, I think procedurally we did the right thing. We commissioned a consultant. The consultant engaged with experts in the community who are largely anonymous to us, but who are, as I understand it, valued citizens in our community who have a lot of experience. And so at least from a process perspective, we have solid recommendations that this council can stand behind because they're coming from a fairly objective process. And I think that's important, right? The pains of the past, as I understand it at least, in terms of council compensation, were that councillors were making decisions and they didn't have a lot of that input. They didn't have that sort of at arm's length, more objective kind of information always available to them. And so the process, I think, we can certainly defend. So I just want us to think about the piece around the strategy, right? Because, if I sort of follow, I think it was Councillor Richardson, what you said about this, let's start with option one, is sort of what I heard, and encourage the next council to move towards option two. But the principle of option two, as I understand it, is getting to the median of our comparator group for the sake of both being consistent with internal corporate policy and being fair and reasonable to those who are giving some time. That's just sort of my read and summary. Councillor Behrens.
Thank you, Mayor Kasenberg. I guess I'm confused, Carrie, because in the notes it says that option one that we've been talking about, 2020, we are using the same comparators as what we do for staff, and we are at the median. That's what it says.
So the project that Ward and Ops Grove undertook was to use the same comparators as were used in the staff comp review and to achieve the middle of the pack. And so the numbers that you see, again, dated because this is 2019 data, that those would achieve the median. The June 2021 option presented by the task force is a change in comparator group. That's the major difference, one of the major, yes. And that's why those numbers are different. Is that what you were asking?
Just so that we're clear, both the June reports are done to the median.
Yes. Yeah.
Because if we incorporate the philosophy of what North Perth has done in the way we pay salaries, we have a comparator group that we've always used. I think it would be most inappropriate to use one comparator group for the staff and one comparator group for the council. I don't agree with that. So the June 2020 is using the same comparator group as we do for staff, and it is indeed the median.
Yes.
Sorry, thank you.
Fair point. Thank you. Anyone else with comments? I think we need to turn to some kind of option here. From a motion perspective, at this point, we could entertain a motion just to receive this report. That doesn't move the needle at all in terms of compensation and could run the risk of putting it into the next council's hands, which is kind of an awkward way for them to start. The other options are that we select one of these options or express the principles of these options in a resolution that looks at actually making a change here. So what is the wish of council at this point? Councillor Andreessen, let's go to you first.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Kasenberg. My only concern is that those numbers aren't indexed right now. So I would prefer to have the real numbers up there. So that's my concern. And so at this point, I would prefer to defer until that was prepared. But that's my feeling. Thanks.
Do you mind if I just ask the question, how does that affect the decision-making process? Just, do you have any speculation that you want to add on that?
Well, my hope would be, could we still have it brought to the table?
Okay, fair enough. I see CAO Snell waving his hand, and we haven't heard from him. You're 13. Let's go.
So with regard to the indexing, we would simply do what we would do in staff evaluations. We would just go back to 2019, add the cost of livings that we've done on the old to the new and we would bring that all back in bylaws. So it fundamentally shouldn't really change the overall concept or overall principles of the June 2020 report. It would just be adding 2020, 2021, and potentially 2023, depending on when we pass the bylaw.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Behrens?
Yes, and that's what I was going to suggest, is that we actually receive the report, but we refer back to the consultant and HR staff to adjust the June 2020 amounts appropriately indexed to inflation. So I would think the inflation would be the 21 and, well, you would know better than me, but the 23 will be up and coming when the new council takes over, so it'll probably just be the 2 years. But I'll let you figure that out. Just index it and kind of show your work like the math teachers tell you to do, and hopefully bring that back. And I don't know if it's possible, Carrie, to have those amounts back for next week's council.
It's not a complicated process.
Okay.
It's well documented information, which I have, but just not right here.
That's okay. Thank you.
Okay, I think I see where this is going then. Let me just ask council, in terms of your wishes about including any guidance or direction to the next council regarding council compositions, or I got to find my words, and ward boundaries. Does this council want to put some guidance in a resolution at this point or next week for that purpose? Should we be doing that? Next week, for next week. Okay, so let's see if I've sort of got this. I think the resolution that's forming looks like this: that Council of Municipality of North Perth receives the report entitled, and whatever the title is, thank you, Clerk Klein, and directs staff to bring forward a bylaw consistent with option 1 in the compensation review report, with indexing values included for council review. And then if we want to go further, we can give the direction, which is we recommend that the next council address compensation in the context of a ward boundary and council composition review that is undertaken early in the term. And that council further recommends to the next council it addresses workload that could come as a consequence of a changed council size. Something like that. It's maybe it's too much to bite off at this point, though, Councillor Behrens?
Respectfully, I do believe that's too much. Yeah. There may be other recommendations that this council may want to make outside of the remuneration. Yeah. We're simply talking the remuneration right now. We're not talking other strategic planning and that, whether it's the ward system or even the size of council. I think to keep it clean at this point, but perhaps next week we could place on the agenda, maybe under the CAO, to maybe suggest recommendations that we would like to make to the next council, but it would be completely different from this. Those are my comments. Thank you.
That's a great process suggestion. Okay, so let's not overcomplicate it. I think that's the message. Seems like a good one at this point. So generally then the resolution reads something like receives the named report and directs staff to bring forward a bylaw consistent with option 1, including relevant indexing to this date. Right? Anyone have any improvements they want to make on this one? At the next meeting. Sorry, thank you. At the next meeting, so that this is done this term. I think that's the wish of this council, right? Councillor Rothwell, comments or input?
On page 11 of the first report, found on page 108, so there's the additional recommendations that deal with compensation that are not specific to the option 1. So that's the cell phone allowance and the possibility of extending the option to participate in group benefits and so on. Obviously, there's cost to those. We haven't specifically spoken about those, but there are costs associated with those. So if we're going to talk about them next week, I'm fine with that. But if I just want to make sure they're not lost, because I mean that's part of the recommendations here in the report. So I just want to make sure that we honor that, and discuss the recommendation. Page 108 of our agenda package.
Thank you, Councillor Rothwell. So perhaps to Councillor Barron's suggestion that we put something on the agenda next time for the sake of cleaning up or tidying our way through recommendations for the next council, maybe we can include that consideration at that point in time. Does it seem reasonable to you, Councillor Rothwell?
Yes, and if I may, just my last question, and perhaps I missed this. When if council agrees with this, when's the effective date for the new council, or is that correct? It's the new council, or is this retroactive to June 2020? Or I don't think it's retroactive. I'm just wanting to make sure I understand this for the new council.
Darkin, did you want to weigh in on that one?
I do. If this council were to choose option one, which would be the Warden Upton Grove report that was done at the same time as the staff comp review, June 2020 was when implementation occurred for staff. I think, we can check that. I would argue that, again, 2016 was the last time this was reviewed, and that the original report prepared by Warden Upton Grove, the intent was for something to be adjusted as that report was received. So, yes, I would recommend a retroactive adjustment.
Okay. Do we need to include that, Clerk Klein or CAO Snell, in the request or the direction to staff with regards to bringing forward a bylaw? Strikes me that we might need to, right? If council is going to consent to that, I think it should probably be addressed in the language of the bylaw. Yes? So is there the will, does staff need further direction on this, or do you want to put, just we'll trust that you will bring that forward? Hold on.
Ultimately, it's a decision of council. We can certainly draft a bylaw with it being retroactive. That's been done in the past, but it certainly is the will of council. Or we can make it effective when the bylaws pass. That date should be decided by council.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Richardson.
Thank you, and through you again. Personally, I'd be quite okay with this to kick off with the brand new fresh slate of council. I don't feel that it's necessary for being retroactive. That's a personal opinion. But I think that going forward with a new term of council, or starting 2 meetings from now or whatever, commencing at that point, or the first pay period, or January, but starting with a fresh slate on council, I think is the best approach, and my approach that I prefer.
Thank you, Councillor Richardson. I try not to weigh in too early, but I agree, actually. I think that it does not look good for this body to give itself a retroactive raise. So, all right, anyone else with an opinion on this one? Let's just leave that piece out then. We're not going to direct staff to that end. We will direct staff to bring forward a bylaw consistent with option one, with indexing to the CPI in a manner used, in the same manner, I guess, used for staff. Okay, anything else? We can address the other issues at our next meeting in terms of having an agenda item about giving advice to the next council. Things to push forward. Okay, anyone have any other improvements on this resolution? We there? Let's be there. All right, I think we have a resolution. Does everyone understand where we're at? The clerk, are you following where we're at? All right, that's great. I need to obviously mover and a seconder for us to proceed. Deputy Mayor Kellum, thank you, will be our mover, and seconder will be Councillor Behrens. Any further discussion or debate? Okay, I'm not seeing any, so let's have that vote. Unanimously carried. How about that? All right. Thank you, Ms. Sharpen, for all your work. I know there's still a little bit that lies ahead for next week, we're hoping, but we appreciate your work and the work of staff to help us get to this point. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Council. Let's move forward then to item 5.1.2. And this one, with unanimous consent of the HR Committee, HR Lead Kelly Fraser brings forward a recommendation that the HR Committee of Council be disbanded, dissolved, effective immediately. I'll invite Ms. Fraser to provide an orientation to that recommendation. Ms. Fraser, welcome. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor Kaysenberg. Good evening, Council. This is probably a fitting report for tonight with everything going on. So the first report involves the HR Committee, and the HR Committee was established in 2009, and its purpose is to act as a support and to provide advice to Council with respect to HR-related matters. The highly regulated HR profession continues to evolve rapidly with expectations to adapt to ongoing social and cultural changes, globalization, technical changes, employment legislation updates, all while maintaining compliance and driving workplaces forward. This report recommends that Council dissolve the HR Committee with the understanding that appropriate measures will remain in place to maintain effective communication surrounding HR items with Council. HR will ensure North Perth aligns with best practices in the industry while maintaining efficient and robust HR practices. So some key reasons for this are to align with our mission so that employees feel safe, valued, and engaged. Ultimately, we do need to remain efficient and have agility. HR has numerous stakeholders like employees, council, and the leadership team to ensure buy-in and align goals, as well as the upcoming ADP HRIS system will support with more strategic data-driven approach, which I'm really looking forward to. Also, benchmarking was determined with other municipalities, and it was deemed that no other municipalities do have one. So we're a bit traditional in that sense. As well as ongoing professional external support, such as Warden Updegrove and legal counsel will be called upon when needed. So for example, tonight with Carrie coming. So council approval and regular updates on HR strategic plans, policies, and programs will continue as required. And HR does appreciate all of the support and guidance from the HR Committee over the past 13 years and will continue to ensure transparency and trust. So a special thank you currently to Matt, Doug, and Todd. So the HR Committee had a meeting on October 18th and did pass a motion to recommend dissolving the HR Committee effective for the 2022 new term of council. So in summary, I am recommending that the Council of the Municipality of North Perth dissolve the HR Committee effective for the 2022 new term of council. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thanks, Ms. Fraser, and not quite as immediate as tonight, I guess. I misspoke, but hopefully you'll forgive me for that. All right, questions and first comments. Anyone have any comments or questions about this matter? Not seeing any indication of that. So let's put the resolution on the floor then, that the Council of the Municipality of North Perth dissolves the HR Committee effective for the 2022 new term of council. Can I call for a mover in this? Deputy Mayor Kellum, thank you. And Councillor Richardson will be our seconder. Any discussion or debate? Councillor Rothwell.
Thanks very much, Mayor Todd, and thanks to you, Carrie, for the report and to our committee. The one question I have is this, is that, as I understand, council has one staff that we're specifically responsible for, and that's our CAO. And we have, in my understanding is that the CAO has been involved in terms of the review process, and we had this report that delegated some of that information through to the HR committee. And my parallel to this is the school board, the Avalon Maitland District School Board. They have one, like ourselves, have one employee that they're responsible for, which is the Director of Education. They have a separate Director's Performance Appraisal Committee, DPA committee, and then the director makes a direct report through to their board in terms of progress and so on, and there's discussions about those things. What I see with this dissolving of the HR committee is something that's, and perhaps I just don't know how that relationship is going to continue on with this council if the HR committee is not there. So if there's a way to you can inform me and the rest of the council how that works, or perhaps any changes that we could make to ensure that it's going to work, because it has to work for council, it has to work for our CAO to make sure that we're leading the corporation forward together. That's my only comment. Thank you.
Ms. Fraser, did you want to address that?
Thank you, Councillor Rothwell. So if your question was specifically with regards to the CAO's performance review, so Todd and I have had previous discussions about this just to ensure that it remains objective and that all of council has an opportunity to provide ongoing feedback and continuous support. So ultimately, there would still be a firm process with the performance review where council would have an opportunity to work closely with the mayor to ensure that that feedback is ongoing in a neutral and fair process. So ultimately, it does fall on council to compile an objective performance review and then bring it to my attention to compile it all in a fair manner and be able to present it to Chris in an efficient way. I do believe and I do trust that that will carry on. And this, I understand that it will definitely take time to adjust because it has been a committee that has been in play for 13 years. I recognize that, and I'm available to ensure that everyone is comfortable and confident in that process and open to feedback and how we can continue to improve moving forward.
Thanks for the comment. And not to belabor the point, it's just a matter that, as I recall, the change that was made was just in this past year, wherein up until that point it came through to council, and that was delegated through the HR committee, if I recall correctly. So now the HR committee is not there. So just as long as something's happening and council knows what's happening, I'm fine with that. I just want to make sure that it's addressed because, as I say, my understanding is that we have one specific employee that this is responsible directly through to council, and likewise the lead works that way. So just as long as everyone understands that that's the process, I'm fine with that. Because as I said before, this is about making sure that we're in lockstep and working to make sure the supports are there for our CAO. And then likewise, the expectations are met. And if they're not, how can they be met? And what other supports that this council needs to provide to ensure they're met? I mean, those are the crucial issues. It's not in a negative context at all. Thank you.
So I think in terms of the process, this council did see a new process for the evaluation of the CEO in this term. As you said, it was fairly recent. That process had implications for the Human Resources Committee, but it can still be executed with the mayor and the HR team lead managing most of the logistics of that, and where the policy and process reference the HR committee, I think we would now reference council. So we would, come back to council at various points, right? I think that that probably needs to be reviewed just for the sake of efficiency to make sure that we're not, losing something significant. But I believe that in most cases where the HR committee was referenced in our process, now council will be the one that would receive or engage at that step and point in time.
Good. I appreciate that. Thank you.
I think so. All right. Any other questions or comments on this one? Okay, I think this is duly moved and seconded, so not seeing any other indication, let's have that vote. And that is carried unanimously. That means that as the new term of council comes into play, that this committee will be removed from our committee roster. Thank you, Ms. Fraser, for the work on this one. All right. Ms. Fraser needs to continue to stand there because item 5.1.3 is yet another matter from Human Resources. This one's about the Ontario Municipal Employees Retirement System, or OMERS, which provides a defined benefit pension plan. And there are some changes coming to this, which Ms. Fraser is here to tell us about. They should provide some improvement, actually, downstream in the recruitment of employees in what is a fairly challenging labor market. But as always happens in these cases, there are some costs, some of them still unidentified, which may lie ahead. So, Ms. Fraser, bring us up to speed on this one, please.
Thank you, Mayor Kaysenberg. So, as mentioned, my next report involves the OMERS pension membership for non-full-time employees. So, OMERS pension plan changes have extended membership to non-full-time employees effective January 1st of 2023. NFT employees do include contract, seasonal, part-time, and students, and this change will allow eligibility to join the plan for all existing and newly hired NFT employees, which will help with recruitment, we're hoping. And just as a quick reference, please note that volunteer firefighters and council are not considered NFT employees. So with some background information on this, OMERS was created to administer the retirement benefits and manage pension investment funds of local government employees in Ontario. And the OMERS contributions are calculated as a percentage of earnings in relation to the CPP earnings limit, and the employers do match that amount. In relation to our bylaw, in January of 1998, North Perth did pass a bylaw to authorize participation in OMERS with respect to employees who are employed on a continuous full-time basis. So the enrollment offered to NFT employees will include an explanation of the plan benefits just for their reference and a mandatory form to complete that confirms their interest. Enrollment into the OMERS plan is not mandatory for the NFT employees. However, if they do turn it down, they are more than welcome at any time to register. These changes have the potential to increase the number of employees participating in the OMERS pension plan, and therefore, as a result of that, will increase the pension benefits incurred by North Perth. The estimated cost of this update is unknown at this time, as we will be getting the letters out in the next few weeks and we'll be able to confirm enrollment by January 1st. We do have approximately 60 NFT eligible staff, so it's not likely to be significant in nature. It is predicted that seasonal employees and contract employees and students will have low to no enrollment, just to anticipate that they want to save costs and may want to maximize their income. However, we do feel that part-time employees will have high enrollment as the benefit will build over the duration of their employment with us. However, additional financial analysis will be captured as part of the 2023 budget. So in summary, I am recommending that the Council of the Municipality of North Perth receives the OMERS membership for non-full-time employees report dated November 7th, 2022 for information. So I'm open to any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Fraser. Questions or first comments from council? Okay, I'm not seeing any, so I have a resolution here, pretty much what she just read, that the Council of the Municipality of North Perth receives the OMERS membership for non-full-time employees report dated November 7th, 2022 for information. Can I call for a mover? Councillor Anstedt, thank you. Councillor Seiler will be our seconder. Any discussion or debate? Seeing none, let's have that vote. And that is carried. Thank you. And you're still in front of us. There's still one more item, I think, for you. That's wonderful. As item 5.1.4, and as a resolution emerging from the HR committee, which is soon to meet its demise, HR lead Kelly Fraser brings forward for council approval a revised technology, systems, and device usage policy. Ms. Fraser, you're standing there. Welcome again. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor Kasenberg. So last but not least, my third report involves the electronic monitoring under the ESA updates. So in April of 2022, the Ontario Working for Workers Act received royal assent and became law. A requirement was established for workplaces with 25 or more workers to have a policy that does outline the electronic monitoring practices. The policy must state whether the employer electronically monitors employees, and if so, the policy must include a description of how and in what circumstances the employer may electronically monitor employees, the purposes for which the information obtained through electronic monitoring may be used by us, as well as providing a copy of the policy to employees by October 11th. So North Perth does have 4 policies that do capture electronic monitoring measures, and one of those policies, that being the computer and technology usage policy, was updated to consolidate all 4 policies into one. The policy title was updated to Technology Systems and Device Usage Policy so that it is able to capture an overarching policy. So the 3 policies that are within that policy, I'm saying policy a lot here, are the protection and use of corporate property policy, the mobile device policy, and the video surveillance of public property policy. So benchmarking and networking were completed with municipal contacts to ensure alignment. As well, this policy was reviewed with senior management, IT, and the HR committee. So I do trust that you've all had the opportunity to review the policy thoroughly in the agenda. So in summary, I recommend that the Council of the Municipality of North Perth approves the Technology Systems and Device Usage Policy included as Attachment 1 to the Technology Systems and Device Usage Policy Report dated November 7th. Open for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Fraser. Okay, let's have first comments or questions on this matter. Councillor Duncan.
It's not a huge thing. In the definition of personal devices, it references council iPads as personal equipment. Now, you should probably have council iPads and laptops now.
As I recall at the committee, we had talked about that too. Did we maybe get the wrong version come forward?
So are the laptops going to be company laptops?
So we haven't had iPads this term. We stopped using iPads last term.
It's not North Perth property, that's your property.
It says council iPads.
Oh, okay, so yes, we will need to remove that.
Yeah, it should be council laptops or iPads, I guess, depending on what's issued.
Yeah, ultimately, it is a corporate device, so maybe we shouldn't even discriminate council within that. It should just be any corporate devices, but open to everyone's thoughts on that.
Councillor Duncan, you want to weigh in on that one? Do we need to be specific about council devices, or is the inclusion of council in the general terms of the policy sufficient to do the job?
I suppose we could probably just delete that completely from the...
Yeah. Okay. See if you want to formally give council advice on this one?
Based on the new technology coming into effect being corporate owned, I think we just need to delete the last sentence of personal devices.
Okay.
Yep.
You okay? So we need the resolution as we consider it to include instruction to delete that last sentence. Okay. personal devices. Okay. Any other questions or first comments on this matter? All right. Seeing none, I have a resolution, perhaps somewhat modified from the original for the sake of capturing Councillor Duncan's catch there. I think as follows, that Council of the Municipality of North Perth approves the technology systems and device usage policy included as attachment 1 to the technology systems and device usage policy report dated November 7th, 2022, with deletion of the last sentence about personal devices. Is there a section number there?
Oh, it's in the
I don't have it open.
definitions section.
In the definitions?
Yeah.
All right. Okay, so there we go. We've captured, I think, that to the extent that staff can act on it. Can I call for mover? Councillor Richardson, thank you. Councillor Rothwell as our seconder. Any further discussion, debate, questions? Seeing none, let's have that vote. All right. And that is carried. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now, I think you might have a chance to take a seat. Thank you, Ms. Fraser, for all of this. Very busy session for her of late. All right, let's turn to item 5.1.5. Council is updated in this item on the cost of policing by the Ontario Provincial Police in North Perth. Our population growth is certainly driving some additional costs. I'll call on North Perth CAO Chris Snell to address this report, which is for information. Welcome, CAO Snell.
Good evening, Council. This is the annual report just for Council's information on the OPP billing model. Certainly, the average cost per property for policing is more or less consistent with 2022. There are a slight increase in the number of households, 140 new properties affect the billing, as well as the 2021 reconciliation. So the monthly cost for 2023 will be up $8,500 and change. Excuse me. But the big picture of this is certainly the new billing model has provided some consistency in OPP policing. For those that have been on council for some time, remember the vast changes from contract to contract, which used to drive us, give us difficulty in budget calculations, but this billing model certainly is helping. Answer any questions council may have.
Thank you, CAO Snell. Council, colleagues, any questions or first comments? Right, seeing none, I have a resolution then for consideration as follows. That the Council of the Municipality of North Perth receives the OPP Municipal Policing 2023 Annual Billing Statement as information. Councillor Behrens will move. Seconder, Councillor Richardson, thank you. Any discussion or debate? Seeing none, let's have that vote. And that is carried. Thank you, CAO Snell.
Thank you.
Let's move forward in our meeting. We have nothing under items 5.2, which is strategic initiatives portfolio. We do have one item tonight from the Corporate Services Department. As item 5.3.1, Council is asked to finalize matters related to the construction now completed of the Reed Municipal Drain. Let the minutes note that Councillor Behrens has exited the chamber. The matter is as follows. Bylaw number 131-2022 being a bylaw to amend Bylaw 131-2021 for the construction of the Reed Municipal Drain be introduced, read, and considered read a first, second, and third time and be finally passed, and that the said bylaw be signed by the mayor and the clerk and sealed with the seal of the corporation. Can I call for a mover? Councillor Anstett, thank you, and Councillor Seiler will be our seconder on this one. Any discussion or debate? Seeing none, let's have that vote. And it's not coming up. There it is. And that is carried. Right, we have further no reports from the programs department tonight. It's 5.4. We have no reports from the facilities group. That's 5.5. We have no reports this evening Also, 5.7 operations. We do not have a report from that department this evening. Brings us magically to 5.8, reports of development and protective services departments. This item 5.8.1. Council is invited to consider a bylaw that establishes and regulates the North Perth Fire Department. I'll call on North Perth Manager of Development and Protective Services and Fire Chief Jenny Pape to address this report, which is for information, and then there's a bylaw later. Chief Pape, welcome.
Thank you, Mayor Todd. Good evening, Council. The municipality passed a bylaw to establish and regulate the North Perth Fire Department in 2003. Since that time, the NPFD has evolved significantly, and legislative changes specific to firefighter training and certification and fire safety inspections have been introduced. Those changes have been incorporated into the proposed bylaw this evening. The proposed bylaw updates the organizational structure of the NPFD, incorporates mandatory firefighter training and certification standards, agility testing and physical examination expectations for recruits, clarifies firefighter leave of absence requirements, legislated fire safety inspection requirements, and confirms the municipality's reliance on volunteer firefighters. This update is to be considered an interim step, with a more fulsome update being provided to Council as part of the mandatory community risk assessment process that will undertake. It needs to be completed in 2024. So I have made a recommendation here for your consideration. The Council of the Municipality of North Perth approves bylaw 134-2022, a bylaw to establish and regulate the North Perth Fire Department. Certainly open to any questions.
Thank you, Chief Pape. Colleagues, any questions or first comments on this one? All right, seeing none, we have the report. We have a bylaw here that goes along with it. Let me read the resolution for enabling this bylaw as follows: that bylaw number 134-2022, being a bylaw to establish and regulate the North Perth Fire Department, be introduced, read, and considered read a first, second, and third time, and be finally passed. The said bylaw be signed by the clerk, the mayor and the clerk, and sealed with the seal of the corporation. Can I call for a mover on this one? Councillor Andreessen, thank you. And a seconder, Councillor Seiler. Any discussion or debate on this? Seeing none, let's have that vote. And that is carried. Thank you, Chief Pape.
Thank you.
Give our regards to the team. I gather there was a fairly successful testing experience for the fire department on the weekend.
There was. We will be putting through 14 recruits, our largest recruit class ever.
Wow, that's wonderful. Thank you. All right, that brings us to item 6 on our agenda. For item 6.1, councillors, are there any reports you would like to ask of staff or of our committees? Not seeing any indication of this, so let's move to item 7. We have received no additional items of correspondence beyond that which may have been introduced in the consent agenda. Let's move on to item 8. We have no additional bylaws this evening to be considered, so we can move forward to the next item, which is number 9. Are there any councillors wishing leave to give notice of motion this evening? Seeing none, let's move to item 10 on our agenda. For item 10.1, are there any announcements that would be of benefit to our community or that reflect well on North Perth at this time? And as always, I invite the clerk, if there's someone who's connected remotely, that connected for this purpose, let's have that list as well. But anyone wanting to make an announcement? Councillor Rothwell.
Thanks very much, Mayor Todd. And this being Remembrance Week, yourself, Councillor Duncan, and myself attended the memorial service at the Cenotaph in Atwood, and it was certainly our pleasure to partake in that event and on a beautiful day, and had an excellent turnout of residents and others in the community, as well as our North Perth firefighters in the parade and so on, and our Legion members. And I want to thank our staff as well as the Cenotaph Committee and our contractor that worked hard to ensure the upgrades to the Cenotaph with the 2 of the walls on the east and north side were removed, and the comments I had from people that they certainly found it much more accessible and for the service itself, and look forward to the additional improvements with budget approval in 2023. So our thanks to members of the community and certainly the volunteers that put the appropriate service of remembrance at the cenotaph in Atwood. Thank you.
Thank you. And of course, the usual ceremony in Listowel occurs on Friday. I believe the start time is 10:30. I'm checking with the deputy mayor on this. 10:30, right? 10:30 is when there will be some parade that will proceed to the cenotaph, and all of the community is certainly invited to participate and bear witness again to the sacrifices that have been made on our behalf for our freedom and our peace. Any other announcements or comments from council should be drawn to public attention? All right, that brings us to item 11 on our agenda. We have no matters tonight for consideration in a closed session meeting of council. That means that under item 12, there's nothing to report out because we did not have a closed session. The council, as a mandated good practice, acts near the end of its meeting agenda to confirm all of its actions and business of its meeting through what is called the confirmatory bylaw. I have a draft of same for our consideration as follows. That bylaw number 137-2022 being a bylaw to confirm generally previous actions of the council of the municipality of North Perth be introduced, read, and considered read a first, second, and third time and be finally passed. And the said bylaw be signed by the mayor and the clerk and sealed with the seal of the corporation. Can I call for a mover on this one? Councillor Anstett, thank you, and Councillor Andreessen will be our seconder here. Any discussion or debate? Seeing none, let's have that vote. And that is carried. Thank you. And Councillor Behrens is returning to the chamber at this point. And that means that we've hit the end of our business that was put before us and taken action on the things that we did see on our table. So we can consider adjournment at this hour. I have a resolution to that effect that the council meeting adjourns at 8:57 p.m. to meet again for general council business on Monday, November 14th, 2022 at 7 p.m. Can I call for a mover? Councillor Rothwell, thank you, and Councillor Richardson is our seconder. That's not debatable, so let's have that vote. And that is carried. This council will meet again in chambers for its last regular meeting of this expiring term on Monday, November 14th, 2022. Until that point, this meeting is adjourned.